to take this away. We're gathered here today for Monumental Reckoning, part of the California Association of Museums Lunch and Learn series on Thursdays. And I think we can move on to the next slide. All right, this webinar is being recorded. Live captioning is available through the National Captioning Institute. For those of you just joining, CAM Programs Manager Tiana will post the link in the chat box where you can access the captioning. The presenters will respond to questions at the end of the presentation. During the webinar, feel free to type your questions using the Q&A icon or function, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The chat box will be closed. If you have a technical issue, please send the host a message using the chat or send an email at programs@calmuseums.org, and we will do our best to address your concerns. All right. Okay. This event is part of the California Association of Museums Lunch and Learn free webinar series and is exclusively sponsored by the University of San Francisco Museum Studies MA program. The University of San Francisco offers a unique master's degree in museum studies, preparing students for leadership positions in artistic, cultural, and heritage organizations that operate in a constantly changing social dynamic. Applications for fall of 2024 will open in August. More information about the program may be found on our website at www.usfca.edu/museum. And I believe one of our panelists today is a graduate of that program, so very exciting. Okay. As we begin this event, we acknowledge and honor that the original inhabitants of our various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnerships and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. Our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. We honor and are grateful for the land we occupy and recognize the ongoing damage of settler colonialism. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I am speaking to you today from the territory of the Tongva Gabrielino peoples, and I encourage you to name and acknowledge the Native peoples where you are located in the chat box. All right. And with that, just one moment. Thank you so much, Heather. Okay, and now it is my pleasure to hand over the presentation to Nicole for Monumental Reckoning.
Thank you so much, Kate. If you stop sharing your screen, I can share mine. There we go, we got it. Okay, pardon me 1 second while I get this going. Thank you everyone for your patience. Okay, so thank you again, Kate. I'm Nicole Meldal. I'm Executive Director of Western Neighborhoods Project, and I am the USF Museum Studies alumni. We're so excited to get the band back together again for this remix edition of our CAM program. And it's lovely to hear that you all enjoyed it too, and we get to do it again. I'm going to provide the roadmap for our afternoon together. First, each of us will give our own introductions, and then I will be heading into some historic context. WNP was part of the primary dialogue around monuments that were removed from Golden Gate Park in 2020. So I'll give you a little bit of background about that. First, we'll hear from Annalisa and then Ralph. Annalisa will talk about how she and other local artists stepped up to creatively harness and collate dialogue around the removal of these monuments and the purpose of public art in general. And then Ralph will explain what San Francisco has been doing to reorient stewardship of sometimes problematic monuments within the city's collection. And finally, at the end, we'll open it up for everyone to discuss the challenges and opportunities that these monuments provide us. And I want to say that we absolutely encourage all of you as peers working through the same issues to be part of this conversation, but I do ask that you join this conversation with respect. So please, no interruptions, no accusations, we're all here to share and learn, and that can only be done in a safe environment, right? So, and we will, again, have dedicated time to talk at the end. So without further ado, I want to hand over the Zoom floor to Annalisa Escobedo.
I'm not working with no women. Hi, all. Good. What is it? Lunchtime hour. I hope everyone got your meals together. My name is Annalisa Escobedo. I'm with the New Monuments Task Force. And I am a visual artist. I am a cultural worker. And honestly, I do a lot of things that I can't. It's going to take a whole break that down, but so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalisa. And next we have Ralph.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ralph Remington. I'm Director of Cultural Affairs at the San Francisco Arts Commission. I'm pleased to be here today. Thank you for joining us. Prior to my role here, I was Director of Theater and Musical Theater at the National Endowment for the Arts under the Obama administration. I was Western Regional Director at Actors Equity Association, and I'm a former Minneapolis City Council member. My practice as an artist is an actor, director, writer, screenwriter, playwright. And so that's a little bit about what I do, what brought me to the work. And my work has always been an amalgamation of social activism, political activism, and artistry. So that's it.
Thank you, Ralph. So as I said before, I'm Nicole, and before I ran WNP, I was a volunteer. So, let the record show that if you just refuse to leave in an organization, eventually, they'll put you in charge and start to pay you a almost living wage. But for those who don't know, Western Neighborhoods Project is a 501c3 community history nonprofit that has preserved, interpreted, and shared the diverse history and culture of San Francisco's West Side since 1999. And we do history walks and talks and other kinds of programs. We record oral histories with folks in the neighborhood and some spicier things like pub crawls and a weekly podcast called Outside Lands San Francisco. And we also manage a really large photo archive called Open SF History, which was launched in 2014 to ensure that we are a total branding nightmare, but also to open up access to private collections and institutional archives without the ability to digitize and make their collections available online. And we have just about over 50,000 photos mapped and downloadable and online so far, if you're looking to kill some time later. And I've worked in history a long time, and I believe that history can be really fun, even though it's not always taught that way. But I depend on history, kind of like some people depend on religion. It really helps me to understand my world. It helps to ground me because it explains how things came to be. And it also helps me to connect with people in my community. And this is the energy that WNP brought to the table when several monuments were toppled in Golden Gate Park in June 2020. So that included these three monuments that you see here. We've got left to right, Francis Scott Key, Ulysses S. Grant, and Junipero Serra. And at that time, it was the 150th anniversary of the park, and we were supposed to stage a large exhibition at our office in the Richmond district called Monumental Golden Gate Park. So obviously that didn't happen in 2020, as many things didn't happen, but it did mean that we were really well situated to have a conversation about these monuments because we were already researching them. We were researching whom they depicted, which is the obvious one, but we were also looking deeper into the context of these monuments. You know, who commissioned them, who paid for them, who were the artists who created them, because all of that context is really, really important if we're talking about now removing or modifying monuments. And the fact that a lot of monuments are often very silent in that they can't speak for like themselves and the broader context that they bring to the table. I think this is one of the biggest problems that we have with monuments. And this isn't a history lecture, so I'm not going to give you the whole history of these three monuments. I'm just going to point out a few salient details. So I guess we can start with the Sarah statue on the right. That was commissioned and paid for by a man named James Phelan, who was working with the Archdiocese of San Francisco. And Phelan was a former mayor of San Francisco, a member of the Park Commission, and he was also a known white supremacist. And I want to point out that I'm using that phrase very specifically. He ran for the US Senate with a campaign slogan of "Keep California White." And this statue was his vision of San Francisco as specifically white and Christian. And in the center, we have Ulysses S. Grant, who was an officer in the Indian Wars that exterminated most of the indigenous population here in California and beyond. And this statue was actually toppled days after it was installed in 1896 by the Stonecutters Union that was upset because prison labor was used to mount to create the stand that you see it on. So these monuments have always been problematic. And then last but well, not least, we've got the Francis Scott Key Monument, which was paid for a very wealthy man named James Lick, who bequeathed all kinds of things to San Francisco after he passed away, almost all of which were required to be named after him. My favorite being the Lick Old Ladies Home, which is no longer around. Francis Scott Key, of course, wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, but he was also a known anti-abolitionist. And the reason he's here is mostly because he had a personal connection to James Lick, not so much for his connection to San Francisco. So this is a very quick and long, but also long way of saying that one, the intent for erecting these monuments matters in thinking about whether or not they should be removed, regardless of whom is depicted in them. Two, monuments have been contested since we've been erecting monuments. So this is not a new process we're going through. It's not a new conversation. And three, relevance is super relative. Statues that no longer have an active meaning in our lives maybe don't need to be here anymore, so that they can maybe make space to add different histories to our cultural landscape in San Francisco. So keep that in mind as we move through the rest of our afternoon together. And so W&P knows all these things about statues. We've got all these photos. And we shared some of these photos of these statues on social media, hoping to have a conversation about it. And oh boy, did people have some things to say to us about these statues and their removal for and against. We even caught some local press for our attempts to moderate this conversation in real time. And what I learned from trying to help everyone find a middle ground is that one, everyone feels right when it comes to monuments. The same statues that spark pain for some people spark pride for others. And that's why collective memory is so complicated. And that really expresses the duality of history and action. And two, reason won't override memory. If someone grew up with something and it's a touchstone of their identity, there's no amount of context I can provide that will convince that person it's problematic. And three, this is probably the thing I think about most when I think about monuments is we're in real trouble because we have to learn how to listen to each other without trying to win an argument. I've seen this play out time and time again. Everyone's so focused on being right, they aren't focused on listening and understanding the space in between, to quote Before Sunrise. And we have to meet in the middle for us to move forward. And Annalisa and Ralph with the San Francisco Arts Commission have been doing exceptional work around finding this middle way and moving forward. So I'm going to get out of the way and let them talk about the amazing work they're doing, starting with Annalisa and New Monuments Task Force.
Hello, thank you, Nicole, for breaking it down and grounding the intent of what just a speck of our monuments we have here in San Francisco. And many of these themes are across, I would say, national and international. And here at New Monuments Task Force, and just to brief a little bit, it's not just me, Annalisa, it's actually Cheyenne Concepcion, that she was the person that actually was inspired to head this on and move this forward. This work started in the beginnings of 2020. We were in the pandemic, but we also were witnessing how all the murders of Black lives and George Floyd. So she was looking into, like, what does public space mean, where we are, how we're feeling, like who matters, whose voices are being heard and seen. And when we, at the time when we only had our outdoor spaces, we definitely looked to our parks, these center places, for variety of reasons we were going out there. But one of the things is definitely who are we honoring? Why do we honor these folks? Why are they here and who are they? So she really brought me on as a task force member and an advisor for this work. And now we are our fellow colleague, Claire Flanagan, who's can we go to the next slide?
Oh, yeah, you got it.
Sorry. Here you see an image. So our work and what we did as a group with others as well, artists, creators, from nonprofits to individuals. We built out a survey, and at the end of that survey that was public participatory, it was these two relic reports, Relic Report 1 and Relic Report 2. The first Relic Report, actually, we put together in categories, all 98 monuments that's in the Civil Arts collection, to kind of just be easy to take in, because one of the biggest things we learn is we don't know much about our monuments and memorials in the collection, and we don't know who they are. So one of the best steps we did is to kind of put them in categories to just digest for people. After that, we made an open call, a public survey, and that public survey, we learned from people. And actually, Nicole, you were part of the participants for 2 weeks from that. I'm sorry, everyone, I think I'm freezing up.
A little bit, but keep powering through.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, everyone, I'm still here. So on this slide, if you guys can see it, these are our questions, 1 through 7. And some of them we asked people to really break it down, like what monuments should be taken down, where should they go, which these are questions that maybe nobody has ever thought about. So it was people's like gut feelings, people's automatic response, people's definitely gave their paragraph and full history, life lessons to it. So our work was to really curate all these responses and listen and navigate through it. And same thing with creating categories for the monuments. We make categories for the responses, and we definitely can read more in depth about this in these relic reports. These relic reports are actually open to the public to use, to download on our website. Next slide. These are just some of the responses that we've heard from people. Just to read a couple is one, I think they should reflect community. SF has never been a place devoid of diversity. It should reflect our community to being better. We also heard monuments represent what and who we are as a society value. They tell a story of who matters and who deserves a permanent imprint in our culture. And let me read one more. Honestly, I tend not to pay attention to monuments unless I'm on vacation. I am mostly tired of seeing the same type of person represented. And from those responses, we came up with 6 recommendations. 1, new monuments must expand public knowledge. 2, new monuments must not be on the side of oppression. 3, new monuments must disrupt old ideas of what monuments can be. 4, new monuments must be dynamic and ever changing. 5, new monuments must tell stories on a community level. And finally, 6, new monuments must challenge observers to stop and think twice. So since then, we've been doing this work, researching, asking the questions, asking people to be with us. We've also started this last summer, Monument Monday, where we were breaking down some of the monuments that we saw. We also did an open call zine, digital zine called the Future Monuments. So looking at people who are thinking differently today, doing that wordplay a little, but future thinking here today, from international to nationally. An example, we had an artist that actually asked for public participation using a paleta cart in Santa Monica to actually collect responses about public art, all the way to an artist that was from Israel whose family was bombed, and she actually, through research and archival and history, she was able to digitally put together what her neighborhood that her family grew up together. So you can actually find out on our website and read all about these artists that are doing future work today.
I love
and I
hearing
believe
about
that's my
artists.
last slide.
Oh, sorry, Annalisa.
No, I believe that's my last slide, but thank you so much. And I think artists are really important to be part of this conversation, because at the end of the day, they're the ones going to make it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you did incredible work that fed into the incredible work that you continue. And Ralph Remington is pushing forward as head of the Director of Cultural Affairs. So Ralph, take it away.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks, Annalisa. In June of 2020, San Francisco Mayor London Breed issued a call for a review of public art after the statues of Francis Scott Key, Junipero Serra, and Ulysses Grant were torn down by protesters in Golden Gate Park. So Mayor Breed tasked the San Francisco Arts Commission, the Human Rights Commission, and the Recreation and Parks Department to examine the history of the monuments in the public realm in San Francisco, the individuals, events, and ideals they venerate, and how the narratives associated with these monuments align or do not align with San Francisco's values today. The committee was a body made up of 3 co-chairs of department heads and 13 community members. Between January and November 2022, the committee held a series of 7 public meetings, hosted 2 virtual community listening sessions, and solicited community input through a multilingual, that was English, Chinese, Spanish, and Filipino survey that garnered 679 responses. The MMAC report, final report, was developed, and in that report, we examined like what is a monument versus a memorial. The MMAC, that's the committee. The definitions were monuments or structures, sculpture, or other objects erected to commemorate a person or an event. A monument is a type of a memorial. And memorials are something established to remind people of a person or event. And this could be an object, a day, an event, or a space, but it's not always a monument. So our work in reevaluating monuments and memorials initially began in 2018, where after 18 years of community feedback and concerns, we began the process to remove a controversial statute called Early Days. And then San Francisco Civic Art Collection has one of the largest and most diverse public art collections in the United States, with over 4,000 art objects. 98 in our collection have been identified as a monument or a memorial. And so that map displayed on the PowerPoint that shows you kind of where those are. And so moving forward, our next steps through our work with the committee, we have developed and updated recommendations to the criteria and guidelines by which we determine the future of historic monuments in the city's civic art collection. And this information was summarized in a final report, and you see the cover of that report right there. It came out in April. And the report featured a summary of the advisory committee's work and process, recommendations, and proposed next steps for phase 2 of our monuments memorials work. We developed a funding strategy on review and evaluation, conducting an equity audit of monuments and memorials in the civic art collection, to engage and build public awareness, to rectify power imbalance, and sustain future engagement. You'll also see some updated policies and guidelines, and an overview of the process to evaluate monuments and memorials, and a summary of the public findings. So all of that being said, as a result of the final report and the work that the committee did, we are pleased to announce that we worked with Forecast, our consultants in the process, and then we applied for a Mellon grant, and we were awarded $3 million for the next 3 years to implement some of these things that we talked about in the report. And one of the big things is to analyze and evaluate every single monument that we have. So we'll do that up against the guidelines that we currently have to determine which should stay and which should go. We're also going to have some live performance activations around the monuments and the plinths that are empty to kind of reclaim that space for the public. And so we will be soliciting artistic input and community feedback, and for community stakeholders to participate in live performance presentations at these various monuments. So I think that's probably all I want to cover right now. There have been a number of monuments that have been removed. Obviously, we talked about that, Christopher Columbus, Francis Scott Key, Pioneer Days. Some were removed, like Francis Scott Key was removed in an act of revolution by the public. Christopher Columbus was going to be removed as an act of revolution by the public, but the city removed it overnight because they wanted to protect the public from being hurt. These monuments and statues, what people don't realize is that they weigh a whole lot. I mean, there's a lot of tonnage, and if that fell on a group of people or one person, then they would be killed. So we don't want that to happen, but we also want to support the public's right to weigh in on these sometimes symbols of oppression and racism and misogyny and xenophobia. So we want the public to weigh in on that, and we want to react to what the public says and honor what their desires are. So with that, I'll turn it back to the moderator, Nicole.
It's my official title today. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, to your point, when I first saw, like right after the monuments came down, and I was like, wow, I'm actually very impressed they got that thing out of there. Francis Scott Key especially, he was very large and very heavy. And I'm so glad to hear, Ralph, all of the ideas and the funding that you will have to push these ideas forward, because I think this opportunity allows for so much amazing interpretation. And my favorite right now, you can all go to Golden Gate Park if any of you are in San Francisco over the summer, and you can see Monumental Reckoning by artist Dana King. Maybe you watched her on the news growing up as well. This is such a beautiful response piece. All of these different sculptures represent the, I believe, 350 original Africans who were brought to America as part of chattel slavery in 1619. And if you want to know more about that, the 1619 project was fantastic. And they're here bearing witness to this horrific part of our national history. And they're bearing it silently, but also not silently at the same time. And since I've taken these photos, the piece has evolved as people have put flowers in their hair and people have drawn, happy faces, sad faces on all of the sort of flat front pieces to the sculptures. And so it's a constantly evolving artwork that has just provided so much critical conversation around what our history is and what it can be in the future. And I highly encourage you to go. But now I do want to open it up to questions from the crowd. I'm going to look at the Q&A right now to see what we have. No one has given us any Q&A. So I guess I'll start off by asking Annalisa and Ralph, this has been a long ongoing process. What has been the, what has stuck with you the most as being part of this process? The conversations you've had, the people you've met, the monuments that you've researched, what comes to mind immediately?
Well, I'll start to say that in the process with the monuments and memorials that we had at the city, what stuck with me was the fact that these folks, the pain that was felt by various communities, it was a multiracial, multi-ethnic community of stakeholders from San Francisco. And the first two meetings were really all about addressing the pain and trauma that people have felt in the public space, in just dealing with observing these issues in the public realm. So I think that was really eye-opening to hear that. Not that I don't experience it myself, but to hear other communities and how they experience it too. And then to try to move people past that to, okay, we know we have pain, but then what are we going to do as a result of the pain? And what are we going to suggest to move forward to change conditions in the future? Because it's so easy, not easy, but it's low-hanging fruit for Black and Brown communities. When we get oppressed, our immediate reaction is to strike back, with the only tools that we have, which is either our voices or our physical bodies, to strike back against what we are experiencing. And we have, in many cases, collectively, very little power compared to the majority. So we only are relegated to this and the mouth, right? But then when we're actually sitting in positions of power, we can actually put policy in place that will actually change the way the society functions. And that's what's the really important thing. So to get people focused, to recenter policy change and to decenter pain is a process. But we got to it, and I think the results are in front of us.
And I would share something that I've been sitting with is, have you ever met someone or you yourself have been in pain for like physical pain for so long to the point where it becomes normalized, where you're like, when it actually doesn't hurt, you realize it doesn't hurt? I've been sitting with the fact that when I've had conversations recently about monuments and memorials, and sometimes from people who are born and raised in the city, they say, oh, actually, I don't know anything about that. I haven't been part of that conversation. I've never noticed. And then when they start to notice and think about it, that's when the pain kicks in. And it's this silence pain that without them knowing that their body is almost keeping a score of it, that I've been reflecting a lot on is how do these public art and how does this space actually, how do we cure that? How do we mend that? How do we give at least small doses of care for those people? And I've definitely been one of those people. When I reflect back, I'm born and raised in LA. When I reflect back to my neighborhood, I can't even think of a monument or a memorial other than the water fountain at the courthouse in my neighborhood. But that when I start to think, I think about pain, and the reasons why I went to that specific site. So I'm sitting with that. I'm also sitting with the results of this hard work we've been doing. We've been developing this work for 2 years. Forecast Public Art was fantastic. Our members, our advisory members were so involved. SF Arts Commission was we all were deep into this and listening, a lot of navigating, but the work doesn't stop here. So what is next? And what is that gracious step to take on the next? I don't have an answer, but definitely those are like what I'm reflecting on and sitting with.
Yeah, that's been for us as museum professionals, since this is CAM, taking the time to listen and absorb people's pain around all of these monuments and these discussions has been one of I not surprising, because people's pain is not surprising, but I don't have any training in trauma response. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist. So for me as a neighborhood historian, I've had to do a lot of groundwork to be able to hold people's pain, respond to people's pain, make space for people and make them feel seen, and actually see them on both sides so that we can try to foster conversation. And for me, it's been personally exhausting, but I'm totally here for this work. I think we're all so exhausted at hearing everyone scream at each other for so long. And I feel like now we're starting to break through and we're starting to have productive conversations, and money is on the table to start moving plans forward to see something come to life in the public sphere. And we have 2 questions that actually feed right into both of your responses. So this is perfect. Jennifer is asking, what are some steps I can take to address the pain caused by a monument in my hometown? What's the best starting point, especially if you're outside of San Francisco?
I can jump in really quick for that. So I just said, what is the next step? But I can tell you at least this step. And Nicole, you're saying it too. Ralph, you briefly mentioned it. And the first step is to create those circles of healing, those circles. And that circle of healing you need is at least people to be able to have a chance to speak. Because like I said, there's a lot of people that don't think about it and they've been living with it and they haven't had the words in the moment to be asked. It's like when you ask someone, how are you? It's like sometimes they don't get that question throughout the day. Like creating just a safe space where everyone can be heard. And even if not everyone's going to agree, because I think it's always great when you have a space where there's different perspectives, but to have somebody that does that, I think it takes someone, definitely a facilitator, to hold space, somebody that understands. And if there is someone that has trauma-informed training to hold that, fantastic. But if you don't, somebody that at least has patience to navigate through that will be great. And that's something when working with the Monuments Memorials Advisory Committee, all of our meetings were recorded. It is open to the public, but you can actually hear that in the first 2 meetings, because it was really important to create space for people to share what they think. They're representing different communities and they're advocating for different folks. So they are speaking and they needed that moment. And they still do. The work doesn't stop at like, okay, step 1 is done. It's literally something you gotta thread throughout the whole process.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would say that for Black and brown people to speak about pain requires them to become vulnerable. And to become vulnerable means that you can be hurt again, just by sharing the pain and the reaction to that pain, whether someone tries to gaslight you and tell you that your pain doesn't exist, or that you're exaggerating your pain, or you really aren't looking at it in the right way. You should look at it this way as opposed to that way. That invalidates your pain. And so you have to really listen when Black and brown populations are talking about their pain, or women, regardless of hue or ethnicity. And I think also that it's important to have since we have a lot of historians here, obviously, but a historian right in this panel, that it's important to understand, how Black and brown communities show up too, that they either show up in one or two ways, right? Usually, right, it's either hard or cool. And you show up hard or cool because those are defenses, that's armor. And even the concept of cool came from the Black community, that we use the word cool and talk about being cool all the time, but don't historically understand where cool came from. Cool came from Black people. Cool came from, hey, we can't show them how we're sweating over this issue or how afraid we are over this issue. We have to be cool. We have to keep it cool. You don't see anything. All you see is cool. And that's where it came from. And we want people not to have to feel that they have to be cool. We want them to be hot. We don't want people to feel as if they have to be hard. We want them to soften. So then you open up and become vulnerable. But the only way people will open up and become vulnerable is if they are safe, if they feel safe. And that's important, to have a safe environment.
Yeah, I think one of the worst things historians do when they try to enter these conversations is to try to tell you what you already know. And so we at W&P, like a lot of what we do is we ask questions. We ask people to tell us what they know about something, and we'll provide, polite corrections if we need to, but it's a different kind of dialogue when it's a conversation than when it's a lecture, right? And I know historians have had a problem with that in the past. We're trying to correct that. Okay, we've got another question. Paula says, thank you for this important discussion. Can you speak to some of the plans for new artist commissions and performances in San Francisco to activate these spaces and promote healing from trauma?
Sure. Excuse me. Some of the plans right now, so we have the $3 million from Mellon, and we are with that comes a staff position that will shepherd this entire project over the next 3 years. So that's the first step, is to hire that staff position that's attached to the grant, and that will shepherd the project, and that will be their duty all day, every day. And so that's the first step. And then for that person to then retain the support of the larger agency and to put all our resources to making this happen.
And I know you had an unauthorized butterfly installed in Golden Gate Park, which was beautiful, but
I loved it.
And then it disappeared as quickly as it went up. So that's
right.
Not what you're looking for, Ralph. You don't need gorilla installations throughout the city, right?
That's right. We can't have gorilla installations. And it's also, while since you brought that up, while the butterfly is whimsical, or was whimsical, it doesn't stand the test of elements, could not withstand elements, could even put people in danger. And also, again, it's almost an entitlement to be able to put anything you want up in any space you think you can put it up in because of who you are, because you deemed it necessary. And while I don't know if that person was white, I do know that that's an expression of white supremacy, that, I can do anything, anywhere I want to go, anything I want to put up, I can put it up anywhere. I can claim any space I want because I deem it so. And so we have these processes for a reason, and so that everyone's honored and everybody's respected and everyone has a voice and everyone has equal opportunity to place monuments or various aspects of artistic expression in the public realm.
Annalisa, what would you like to see installed somewhere in the city?
Well, I love that butterfly. I think it was so cool, but I do agree with Ralph. I was like, the reason why we're doing this work is because some people are not part of the conversation. So how do we deeply look into the processes we currently have and become more inclusive? And definitely when somebody just jumps in like that, like, wait a minute, we're missing everything. So as much as I love it, I do completely agree with Ralph with like this process. What I would love to see, my take with monuments and new monuments and how monuments should be, and there's a part of me that's a historian. So I've also worked in restoring murals in the city. Maya Piece has been the biggest one I've worked on, 500 years of resistance out on the mission. And so this concept of like keeping history alive is really important to me. But I always wonder, like, time does change. So a little bit with Dana King is, what does it look like to remix something here and there? What does it look like for an artist to sit in a room to listen to diverse people speak their mind? And what can that diverse monument look like? Because those conversations are also part of history. So I sit with creating more pathways for the artists to have that more creative expression, to interpret the moment, interpret the conversations of why someone is so important to honor.
And we do still have the butterfly, by the way. It's not up, but it's in storage.
Do you know what it's made out of? I have so many questions about the butterfly.
We think that it's made out of some kind of foam core. And we tried to get someone to say who it belongs to, but no, of course no one wants to admit it. And so we can find out more about it. But I think it's made out of some kind of foam core, so it wouldn't stand in the public very long. It would disintegrate. But yeah, that's
Do we even think we should be investing in permanent statues and memorials anymore? Should we be installing public pieces that are more able to be responsive and interchangeable?
I think we should. I think that temporary, there's much more excitement around temporary installations than around permanent installations. Because if you talk about anything permanently, then I think the political process becomes so Byzantine at that point, because everyone then wants to say, because they think it's going to last forever. So then by the time you end up with something, it's either watered down or everyone's not happy, or a big part of the population is really unhappy. So temporary, I think, to your point, Nicole, temporary installation is the way to go in most situations these days, because everybody knows it's only going to be up for a little bit of time, right? And then it'll go away, and then they'll have their chance maybe. And so I think that's true.
I'm to be honest, I'm real conflicted, because there is power in permanence, and by finally telling people who are not represented currently that they are going to be there for a long time and they're going to be visible for a long time, I think there's power in that. But I agree, Ralph, like I don't see an easy way to create consensus around who gets to be seen permanently in any given space. But I would like to see more women, just any woman, just it would be nice.
Yeah,
I love both. I love the idea of having some permanency, and also because longevity is really important. Lessons learned from history is really important. So we can try not to do them again. But also temporary is amazing, because you do include so many more people. You are an artist, and the city, inviting more artists to come back to the city, creating more opportunities only gets them to come back and stay longer. So I love a little bit of both. And just to give people some context on where I am, I'm actually talking about butterflies. There's actually a butterfly right above me. I am assisting Lorraine Garcia Nakata. We're on 16th and Shotwell. She is working on the mural that's been on hold for the last 2 years that finally kicked off. This is going to be one of the homes for Galeria de la Raza. This building is all 100% affordable housing. So we're getting all the kind of neighbors coming out. I love it. And this will be permanent. This is a permanent mural for the community and for the residents that live here. Lorraine has actually done a lot of in between the whole time before kicking off paint. She didn't just say, I'm going to paint this. And Galeria didn't say that, but it took a process to invite community members and listen and gather stories and learn who's going to live here and who's been living here to create these images. And one of the biggest things in this busy, if you've been on 16th Street, you know how it is. It's people wanted something tranquil and beautiful. So there's a butterfly in the sky to give some people some peace of mind while they're at home on 16th Street. But this is a permanent mural. This is an example of what I mean.
So yeah, and that's great. And I agree that there should be a mixture of temporary and permanent all the time, right? And I hope that we do more temporary installations in the future, because that's where a lot of energy is. People feel like they can be heard, but we definitely need permanent monuments and memorials going forward. The challenge for all of us, though, is as much as we think we have it together today and we really think we know the answers, this is the answer now. This is the way to be politically correct. This is where it is. It's going to change. Like 20 years from now, they'll look at us and say, how backwards were those people? How were they thinking? You know, what was that all about? You know, why weren't they addressing polyamory, for instance? You know, like, you know, why were they so backwards to not address polyamory? You know, like, you're going to have that, because I think polyamory, just to digress, probably will be a majority population thing in the future, in 20 years down the road, because clearly monogamy is kind of relegated to the past in that way. And so that's just an example that to show you how things could evolve in the future. And then they look back at us and say, why weren't they honoring this? Why weren't they establishing that? Why didn't they act as if this existed? So, you know, it always moves. So whatever we think is permanent and is good today, as politically correct as it might be wrong in the future.
It's true. Maybe, and things change so quickly. Like I feel like it's accelerating too. Maybe any monument that goes up, on the back of it, it should just say, we're doing our best, y'all. Like, feel free to reconsider at any given day. Like, the full caveat, feel free to take me down at any point. And I think we're coming up on time. I do want to make sure that the people who have spent the afternoon with us, thank you so much. If you need to get a hold of us, this is how you can, all of our emails are right here. And Ralph, Annalisa, may I just say before we kind of sign off, I love working with you two so much. I'm so glad you're in San Francisco. And one of the things I love about you both is that, Annalisa, you're an exceptional artist, and I see you put history and community into every artistic work that you do. From the early days of knowing each other at the California Historical Society, working the front desk. And Ralph, you come from a performance background. You hold all of the arts of San Francisco. And the first thing you said to me was, why doesn't this city have a history museum? What is going on here?
Yes.
Conversation about that. And that's another Zoom program. But
that is worthy of one.
Oh my gosh. But I see you both having this broad view of what culture is. And I so appreciate that. And I so appreciate Cam for giving us the space to have a conversation about it.
Thank you, Nicole. It's such a pleasure to be here with you both. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Ralph. Always a pleasure to have both of you guys. I do want to make a quick pitch. New Monuments Task Force are hosting an event this Saturday at 12 o'clock to 3. We're actually in prototyping, developing, and thinking about these conversations of like people that are new into it, been part of it, who likes to have fun, because this is a very complex. We're developing a loteria game called Monument Loteria, and we're prototyping it this Saturday at ICA, the Institute over here in Minnesota. I can definitely share more information on that through the links. So I hope you guys can attend. It's a free event.
Oh, and Tyler, I just saw your question. I'm so sorry. Are there currently any concrete plans, good pun, by the way, for new monuments yet? Ralph, do you know if there's any new monument?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Are there any plans for new monuments? No, we won't be doing any new monuments for a while because we have to go through this audit and, you know, and then if any new monuments are gonna have to require funding. There is a feeling, not a feeling, Ed Lee monument that is being worked on for City Hall that could go in the old Phelan space. Where Phelan is currently in City Hall. So taking Phelan down and putting Ed Lee up. So that's what's in process right now. We're trying to figure that out, and all of the things and the money is being raised for that, and the family is involved, the Ed Lee family. So stay tuned for that one.
Thanks, Ralph.
All right, everybody, this was such an incredible panel and there was so much to think about. I know I'll be thinking about it for a long time. Before we go, I wanted to make sure that we call out the next Lunch and Learn, which is really, really exciting and which will be coming up on August 17th. So stay tuned. It's a program about strategies for utilizing teen volunteers in small museums. So do not miss. I know this is something that's really difficult and really important to cultivate that next generation of museum goers and folks involved in culture work. All right. Thank you all so much for your time and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.